Welcome back. It is power rankings time. So this week there's some movement in the power rankings. There's some dramatic movement in the power rankings, and I feel like there's going to be further dramatic movement in the power rankings in the coming weeks. I'm not entirely happy with where everybody's at because we're at that weird spot where there are some teams that I know have bad records that are going to turn around. There are some teams with great records that I know may very well come back to earth, including a couple of teams I cheer for. But at any rate, here we are. Power rankings. I'm going to say this. I don't have to staple number one into the spot because we don't know who number one is this week. Vegas did not have a fantastic week. So, number 32 on the board this week. Why change what works, right? So San Jose did move themselves up past Edmonton, and then Edmonton won tonight. And Seattle lost last night, or Seattle. St. Louis lost last night. Of course, Edmonton beat Seattle. And it's another no mercy loss for San Jose. So that's 4 of them this year that they've been not just beaten, but blown out. Remember, a no mercy loss is a 5-goal difference or more. So, yeah, San Jose stays last. It was a close call. They almost didn't. 31st on the board is Edmonton. So 2 weeks in a row with Edmonton at 31st. But there's some good signs tonight. Like when I'm hearing, well, they got a really good performance from Skinner. No, what they did was they limited chances against. Skinner played well when he had chances to face, but they limited those chances against. They limited those defensive breakdowns, and all of a sudden, they looked like a competent team against Seattle. Now, whether or not it's going to translate into other games, we'll see. Calgary beat Seattle, of course, as well, and then things didn't necessarily go swimmingly for them after. So, yeah, but the Oilers not last this week. So, there you go. Number 30, dropping 6 spots from last week. Columbus. They're just not winning games. Columbus plays well for stretches in every game they have, but that full 60 minutes, very elusive for the Columbus Blue Jackets. They sit with 4 wins on the season. Oilers have 3. San Jose has 2. So, yeah, for Columbus, they're in a really tough spot because they could be 31st next week. I think it would take a lot for them to be behind San Jose, but is it plausible that Edmonton, the worst, is now past? Maybe. You don't want to read too much into one result, which I know is what usually happens on power rankings night. People are like, well, why did this team? Because it's more than just the one night. But yeah, Columbus is 30th. Number 29. Moving up 1 spot from last week is Calgary. So just a 1-spot jump for the Calgary Flames. The loss against Ottawa preventing them from moving up any further. They had the loss against Toronto prior to that, of course. And yeah, with Calgary, it's just it is a matter of consistent results, getting more out of some of the guys who are getting paid a lot of money in Calgary. But they do move up 1 spot from last week. We'll see if they move up again next week. Number 28. Also, moving up 1 spot from last week is Chicago. So Chicago goes in and they beat the Tampa Bay Lightning, which when you see Tampa Bay drop in this week's power rankings, that's part of the reason why. But Chicago gets a 4-point game out of Bedard. And with that one game, Bedard, all of a sudden, his projections from this year changed dramatically. And I would expect that to happen. Bedard's probably going to go 3, 4, 5 games without a point, and then suddenly he'll have 4 or 5, and he'll have 2, and then he'll go on a bit of a stretch where he doesn't have points. Rookies, you often get that. But yeah, Chicago moves up 1 spot, and if you take them lightly, they can beat you. Number 27, also moving up 1 spot from last week, Seattle. So this is all a direct result of Columbus dropping, basically. And Seattle doesn't move up any further because they lose against Edmonton. So every time it looks like maybe they're ready to pull themselves out of this funk they've been in, they suffer another setback. So for Seattle, a team that needs some more wins than what they have, they've won 5 out of 15 games. Again, it's early in the season, but making up that distance between yourself and the playoffs, and you got teams to jump over, it can be difficult. And again, notice how many teams in the Pacific Division are already on the board down here. Number 26, dropping 5 spots from last week, is Nashville. Nashville had a rough week in hockey. 5-9 now on the ice. The weird part is watching as the stats that their goalie, Saros, was putting up weren't any good. And then every time Nashville gets a goal, they mock the other goalie. It's one of those things. I know I've talked about it for years. I know I'm mentioning it again here. It's just odd because they're 5-9. So to me, once you reach a point where your team's, meandering and not doing very well, I don't, of course, I don't go for goalie mockery anyways. There may be a video on that at some point soon. But at any rate, yeah, Nashville down to 26. Why would I talk about goalie mockery? There's reasons I have. Just things. But yeah, Nashville ends up in the bottom row. Is that the first time they've been in the bottom row this year? I don't know that it's the first, but they're there again. Number 25. Same spot as last week as Arizona. Arizona is a lot more fun to watch this year. They're able to put the puck in the net, and guess what? They are currently one game above 500. So going into this season, I said I could see Arizona being a 500 team. I didn't think they were going to be that bad. And so they're right now a team that's won 7 out of 14 games, and I don't think they're that bad. They're actually able to score. There's some talent there. You can see that progression with Arizona, so while I still don't expect them to be a playoff team, they're fun to watch. And that game against Nashville, they showed the ability to come back and win a game that they would have given up on a year ago, 2 years ago. Number 24, dropping 5 spots from last week, Minnesota. Minnesota very close to that bottom row. The back-to-back losses hurt them this week. Minnesota finds themselves a couple of games below NHL 500. They're just not getting the wins when they need them. The future is still bright here. You've got Boldy, you've got Rossi, you've got some good young players. Gustafson's a young goalie, but the present is not as exciting. And so the trading out of Addison to bring in Bogosian, I totally get it. We'll see if that works for them sooner or later. But at any rate, right now, not much is working for Minnesota just on a regular basis, and so they're 24th. Number 23, dropping 1 spot from last week, is Buffalo. Inconsistency. So again, the inconsistent teams end up being in this row. The teams that may very well end up in a playoff spot by the end of the year, but the inconsistency hurts them. So tonight against Pittsburgh, there were good stretches of that game for Buffalo, absolutely. And then Pittsburgh just kind of takes over and they win the game by a final score of 4-0. So for Buffalo, they're 23rd on this week's power rankings. They dropped 1 spot. But remember last week, they were actually up 7 spots. So they're 6 points ahead of where they were 2 weeks ago. Yeah, so there you go. Number 22 on the board this week, Washington. So the Capitals move up 5 spots from last week. A 5-point jump. Ovechkin gets a couple of goals tonight, including an empty netter. Washington's play has started to turn around. This is good news if you're a Caps fan, right? The Caps were definitely getting results, but they weren't necessarily playing really well. Now they're starting to play better, and thus the reason they've moved up from the bottom row. And next week, another 5-point jump. They're 17th next week, or maybe even higher. Again, I feel like this is one of those moments in the season where now that we're into the second month, there's going to be some teams that go on a bit of a run here in both directions. So I would expect some movement next week on the power rankings as well. Number 21, dropping 8 spots from last week. 8 spots for Tampa. So I know that Johansson's one that we're all rooting for. And obviously when Tompkins is in the net, we root for him as well. They need Vasi back. And tonight without Kucherov, it wasn't there. So for the Tampa Bay Lightning, a team that wants to get into the playoffs and show that, hey, they've still got it and they could still go on a run, they're finding themselves ways to lose right now. And the loss at home against Carolina, that's a tough one. Of course, they beat Carolina in a shutout of their own earlier in the season. So now that series is 1-1 between the two. But for Tampa, they need wins. They're just not getting the wins right now. They need more wins. Number 20. This one's tough. This one's a tough one. And I'm going to explain this. So Philadelphia ends up dropping a couple of spots. Philadelphia dropped more than that. But with the wins against Anaheim and now against LA, they've moved back up the board to the number 20 spot. So from where they were last week, they've dropped 2 spots. The loss against San Jose was tough, right? That was a game that they just didn't look very good. The game against Anaheim, I thought it was also a reflection on how Anaheim is kind of peaked a little bit. So Anaheim hasn't taken a major drop this week, but I do feel like for Anaheim, this week coming up is a key one. But for Philadelphia, now they've gone on the road. They've won these games in California. I want to see what's going to happen after that. So Philadelphia is still not too far from the second row. But yeah, they're 20th overall. Their overall record is 7-7-1, and a lot of teams are in and around that range, right? So again, you're in a spot where a lot of teams are. Well, let's get into 19 here, and I'll give you an example. So number 19 on the board, moving up 4 spots from last week, is St. Louis. They absolutely destroyed Colorado tonight. Destroyed them. A St. Louis team that has struggled with getting goals all of a sudden isn't. Robert Thomas was struggling. He's not struggling anymore. Krug didn't have a point. Now he's got points. The players that you want to see playing better for St. Louis all of a sudden are. Maybe it's that you look at the standings and you realize third place in the Central is really kind of wide open. Like, there are a number of teams that could compete for that third spot. With Nashville being off, right? Minnesota being off as well, there's an opening there. And with Colorado looking vulnerable, the way St. Louis pasted them tonight, we'll see, right? So yeah, St. Louis moves up 4 spots from last week. Otherwise, yeah, Philadelphia would have kept that spot. So who's number 18? Well, the team of jerks that went in and knocked Philadelphia down is actually also from Pennsylvania, and it's the jersey I'm wearing, because Pittsburgh moves up 8 spots. So Pittsburgh, 4-game winning streak for them right now. They've gone from the 3-6 start to now they're 7-6, and they're really starting to click. So for Pittsburgh tonight, that shutout victory over Buffalo, it ticks all the boxes you want if you're a Penguins fan. You get a good game from Jari, right? You're getting production now from Carlson to go along with Crosby's produced the whole way through. This team is a growing concern now if you're in the East. We'll see how far Pittsburgh can go with this, but it is a 4-game winning streak. It's been very impressive, and they move up 8 spots. Number 17, moving up 3 spots from last week, is Ottawa. So Ottawa moves up. They win that game against Calgary. Now, what impressed me there was that it didn't feel like they were dealing with any kind of issues with their confidence coming off that loss against Vancouver, because they outplayed Vancouver for large stretches of that game. I would have totally understood if they had like a setback tonight and they had a hard time. But no, they came through. They got the victory. It was an impressive win for them. It wasn't really in much doubt once you got to the third period. So for Ottawa, and again, I look at the game against Vancouver. I did not punish them for the game against Vancouver because I felt like they were the better team for a lot of that game. And that's part of what I try to do at the power rankings. It's not just wins and losses. It's how you win, how you lose. I try to keep track of all that as much as possible when I decide on these. So Ottawa ends up moving up to 17. Number 16. And dropping 5 spots from last week is the Islanders. Now, if you want to look at a team that could have a precipitous drop next week, it's the Islanders. So the Islanders dropped 5 spots from last week. I could see them down as far as, say, 23rd if they have another week like they just had. Yeah, the Islanders, there are some concerns I would have if I was an Islander fan. The game against Washington tonight, part of that concern. And, yeah, protecting leads, that's become an issue for them just overall from shift to shift. The games are still fast, which is like a staple of Islander games, but it feels like there's way more shots than there normally are in Islander games. And it feels like they're not really playing Islander style of hockey that often now. So, yeah, they're 16th, and they're threatening to move way down the board next week. Number 15. Moving up 2 spots from last week is Montreal. So for Montreal, they have gradually moved up the board. And again, when I look at power rankings from others around the internet, they have Montreal pretty low, which I get. I totally get it. Like, if you look at chances and you look at what they're generating, but you look at the results, tonight they get a win against Boston, right? And a lot of heart in that win against Boston, and I feel like they're starting to play better. So their results were really heavily leaning on the goaltenders early in the season. I agree with that. That assertion from others, but now they're starting to play better, and you can see that there's a belief they have when they have a lead or even when they're down. And yeah, I really think that for Montreal, they're going to be an interesting one to watch the rest of the way. I don't think they make the playoffs. I don't think that'll happen, but I don't think they're going to end up way out of it either, and I think they're going to make teams earn the points on them all season. Number 14. Same spot as last week is Anaheim. So I do feel like I might have jinxed Anaheim by saying, hey, it'd be kind of fun if they're a good team when we go down there and we have a chance to see them. I haven't won since I said that, so I'd like to apologize to Ducks fans everywhere. So I will counter that with, fine, I hope they suck. I hope they're just terrible. Anaheim stays in the same spot as last week. Um, if they have another week like they just did, they will not stay there. So that's the basic rule of it. They will not stay there if they have another week like this one. Some tough breaks here and there. Yeah, okay. They had the 6-game winning streak. Lose a couple of games when they get home. All right, we'll see what happens from here. But again, disconcerting loss against Philadelphia. But there's another California team we haven't got to yet that I will be discussing a little bit when I get there. So number 13 on the board, dropping 4 spots from last week, is Detroit. So for the Detroit Red Wings, they had that winning streak at the start of the season. Things kind of fell apart after that, right? They haven't been able to get that back. But today they had an impressive win against Columbus, which I understand Columbus is down here. But for Detroit, there's still things going on here with Detroit that make me think, this team may very well still be a playoff team when all is said and done. But yeah, they slide out of the top 10 for the first time in, is it 3 weeks? I think it's 3 weeks since they've been outside the top 10. So we'll see if they bounce back next week. Number 12, same spot as last week, is Toronto. Toronto gets the bounce back victory tonight. And by bounce back, I mean Samsonov. Great start for Samsonov. All right, fine. Everything goes well. And Vancouver loses the game against Toronto. But it's a matter of consistency and seeing that from one game to the next from the Toronto Maple Leafs. What will happen in the next game? It's pretty easy on a Saturday night on Hockey Night in Canada. You got a Canucks team coming in 10-2-1 to get up for that game and go, hey, we got to go out there and show them what for. And we've got all this pressure because we've underachieved to this point. Can they maintain it? I know they can. This is a very talented team. I do think pulling Reeves out of the lineup and seeing what that did for the fourth line, that may very well have been part of the trick here to getting them out of that. It's not like they've been getting blown out either. So the fact that they're losing close games, you have to look at every member of the team. And I think the team they put out there tonight, much more geared towards winning. We'll see if that continues. Number 11, dropping 3 spots from last week, New Jersey. What impresses me with New Jersey, and I mean this, is that they have managed to still stay relevant and look okay without Hischier and without Hughes. Losing one of their most important forwards and their most important two-way player, and then losing one of the most dynamic players in the entire league, and still looking dangerous, still looking fast, still having enough in their lineup that they can win their share of games. I think it says a lot about the New Jersey Devils as they are. That said, they did drop this week. They're no longer in the top row. We'll see if they drop again next week. Number 10. Also dropping 3 spots from last week is Colorado. So for Colorado, 5 losses in 6 games will do that. You go all the way from 3rd to 10th on the power rankings board. And the loss against St. Louis, I'm not going to overreact to it. If I was going to overreact, they'd be all the way down to like 16th or something like that. And maybe the first year I did power rankings, I would have been tempted to do that. I'm not going to do it. But is this concerning? Yeah, it is. Yep, and I would imagine Avalanche fans are concerned as well. They've had injury problems. Yes, they still have injury problems. However, this team should be playing better than losing 8-2 at home against St. Louis. It's not just that they're losing, it's how they're losing. So when they lose these games, they've had, 3 shutouts against them? They just don't look like the same team. So for Colorado, a team that was favored to win a Stanley Cup by a lot of people after the Stanley Cup final ended with Vegas there, and Vegas wins the Cup. I don't know how many people are taking Colorado right now. I wouldn't imagine that the number is nearly as high as it was before the season started. Number 9, rounding out the second row, moving up 7 spots from last week, is Winnipeg. The Winnipeg Jets are playing well. I'm very impressed with what the Winnipeg Jets have been able to do. This is why when I see Jets fans saying, well, it's a mediocre team, so, we wanted management to improve things. It's not a mediocre team. This is a good team. And what impresses me, too, is they're getting results, even though Hellebuck's numbers haven't been stellar. So this is bad news for the rest of the NHL, that Hellebuck's going to get better numbers, and Winnipeg's going to be harder to beat when that happens. The Jets, they look like a legit playoff team right now. Pretty consistent results. I'm impressed with their first, second, and third lines. I like the Jets. Number 8, moving up 7 spots from last week as well. And I really think they've got things figured out at this point, and that's Florida. The Florida Panthers, who were meandering in this range on the board for a while, now they're back in the top row. Are they going to stay there? My guess would be yes, because they're starting to get those results. Barkov's playing really well. Bobrovsky's been excellent. And they're about to get Ekblad and Montour back. I have no reason to think that Florida's going to necessarily slow down. Who knows? Maybe they end up going on a run here and they end up first in the division. That spot that we all thought, well, Toronto should be first this year, right? Number 7, not all. I know there's people who say, I didn't believe in Toronto. So, anyways, number 7 on the board, moving up 3 spots from last week. Carolina's back in the top row after a couple weeks outside of the top row. Carolina 9-6. Is that a mediocre record? For Carolina, yes. But in the overall grand scheme of things, winning 9 out of 15 games is good. Their road record is getting better. They go into Tampa Bay tonight, and they handled it. They made it look relatively easy, which is scary for the rest of the East. Because if Carolina really starts clicking like this, I think getting Brett Pesce back helped too. I do. I think that helped as well. Not as much last night against Florida, but tonight against Tampa Bay, you could really see that defense clicking. There were no opportunities for Tampa Bay for large stretches of that game. Yeah, Carolina's starting to round into form again. Number 6, dropping 2 spots from last week. And again, I don't want to overreact, but the LA Kings at home are not like the LA Kings on the road. The LA Kings on the road are 7-0-0. The Kings at home are 1-3-3. What's going on with LA at home? So this is concerning, and again, if we see this record stay as it is, and this is why I was talking about this in the review, I'll mention it here as well. I kind of feel like maybe I should have a power rankings like I do every week, and maybe every 2 weeks I do a split rankings where I rank teams at home and how they're playing on the road. Because there are some teams that play really well at both, and there are some teams that really, really don't. The Kings are one that really, really don't. If you're ranking Road Warriors, they might be number 1 in the NHL. If you're ranking teams at home, they might be near the bottom. So the Kings that lost tonight against Philly, are they going to turn it around? Is this just it's only been 7 games, we'll see, or is it concerning? If you're a Kings fan, let me know. Are you concerned? And then the worst part is, of course, they win all those games on the road, which means that the tickets are in demand, and then you go watch them at home and they suck. You're sitting there and you're like, Will Ferrell's here. Why aren't they better for Will Ferrell? Doesn't anybody care that Will Ferrell's here? They've only shown him on camera 65 times tonight. Doesn't anybody? Every LA game, it always gets me how every LA game they have to show Will Ferrell at least 15 times, and I get it. He's a celebrity, but it does feel sometimes like, is there nobody else? Like, aren't there normally celebrities in LA at games? Anyways, number 5 on the board, moving on from LA, staying in the same spot as last week as Vancouver. I do think that 5 is probably as high as Vancouver's going to get on this board. The loss against Toronto tonight was not a matter of them not playing well as much as it was they get the win over Ottawa in a game that, maybe there's some fortunate bounces here and there, and tonight it happened the other way around, right? So for Vancouver, this is one of those games that, it's a learning experience and all that. Now they get Montreal. We'll see how they do against Montreal. Montreal showing tonight against Boston what they can do. So for Vancouver, they've got to refocus and figure out what went wrong here and be ready. And of course, DeSmith will start that game in Montreal, and we'll see how things go. But for Vancouver, they just stay in the same spot as last week. I didn't feel like one loss was enough to justify moving them around. Number 4. I just realized something here. Number 4 is Dallas. So number 4, Dallas moves up 2 spots from last week. Impressed with their game today against the Winnipeg Jets. One will notice I didn't bust Winnipeg down for that. Winnipeg played really well against Dallas, to be honest. That was a really good game. So I didn't feel like punishing Winnipeg made a lot of sense. Whereas for Dallas, they're playing their game. They're playing relatively well. The results aren't as consistent as I'd like them to be, but Robertson's playing better. I know we're still not getting the goals from him, and I don't know why I say we, because I don't play for Dallas. I don't run Dallas. But the team isn't getting from Robertson, I think, what they'd like to. But it at least it's starting to turn in the right direction. And Sagan has started getting points too, so they can get points out of Sagan, and if Duchesne can heat up, I think Dallas is going to be in contention. Number 3. dropping one spot from last week, is Boston. So Boston was number one on this board a few days ago. They're not number one now. And I had a good laugh when Boston was number one because I thought, this doesn't seem right. Because I would not say that Boston necessarily is playing the best hockey in the league. And I think Montreal showed tonight Boston can be beat. Boston, absolutely they can. There's a good lineup there. There's some good young guys in that lineup too. But are they an unbeatable juggernaut? Not really. And so for Boston, maybe they're going to start to descend a little bit here as well, dropping the one spot this week. But there's Boston, Dallas, and Vancouver. This is an alternate universe we're living in. I don't know how I feel. Number 2, dropping one spot from last week, is Vegas. So Vegas did get the win last night against San Jose, and they made it a blowout victory, which showed that, they are much better than San Jose. But we knew that. And for Vegas, they've had a couple of setbacks. I think that the Vegas Golden Knights are still playing ridiculously well, and their record is almost exactly the same as what they had last year at this time, where I was told it doesn't matter, Vegas isn't that good, they're just in the Pacific. And when I pointed out they were beating teams that weren't in the Pacific, I was told that doesn't matter either. So for Vegas, they're number 2 this week, so they've been around number 1 and number 2 every week since the season started. Very strong start for Vegas. But number 1 this week, the best power play in the league, New York Rangers. New York Rangers are lethal on that power play to the point where their last game they only had 1. So the New York Rangers now are starting to get that experience the Oilers did, where all of a sudden they weren't getting power plays anymore. And I don't know if an official is consciously aware that they're raising the bar for what constitutes a penalty against certain teams, because in the back of their head they know how good that power play is. But Edmonton went through this last year, and now it feels like maybe the Rangers are starting to go through it as well. But when that power play clicks, it's insane. And this is a team that's winning with Demang in net. They were winning with Quick in net. They're winning without Shesterkin, which was the one thing that I think we all kind of agreed with was going into this season, well, the Rangers will go as far as Igor can take them. A, Igor's stats haven't been great. B, he's been hurt for a week now. C, they're still winning. They're still winning, and they're finding ways to win. So the New York Rangers this week are number 1 on the power rankings board. And I don't know if that's happened before. I feel like that's a first, but maybe not. I could look through previous year's power rankings, but I don't think I'm going to do that. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. And yes, I expect next week there will probably be some dramatic shifts on this board because we've got U.S. Thanksgiving coming up. We've got some very busy nights coming up in the next 2 weeks. We also, of course, this week have games going on in Sweden. I will be talking about that once we get into the week, so stay tuned for that. If you haven't already hit like and subscribe, it'd be greatly appreciated if you did. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. And for the power rankings, I will talk to you again next week. Thanks again for watching.